Welcome to the home of Clarence Tom Ashley and Hetty Ashley. They lived here in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. My name is Joe Dean Ashley, and somewhere around here is over here is my cousin Tom Moore. And we are the grandsons of Tom and Hetty. And Tom lived over in Saltville, Virginia with his parents, Eva Ashley Moore, who was a daughter, and my uncle Robert Moore, who was a train engineer. And I grew up in the house next door. So Tom was over here a lot, and we were all together a lot. And I thought it was really great growing up here on Woods Hill. It was back in the 40s and 50s. It was quiet and peaceful. And some might say boring. But I went the quiet and peaceful route because even though there wasn't much, this is the old road out here that went to West Jefferson. There wasn't much traffic. It went down and up into the Forge Creek area and wound around, and it was real crooked, and nobody much ever went to West Jefferson. It was too hard.
Got a good seat.
So anyway, growing up here was great, and it was a farm at the time. My granddaddy raised some nice tobacco crops, and my grandmother had chickens and a couple of milk cows, and it was some light farming, but it was interesting. Millers, our neighbors across the street, have always been our neighbors, and at that time they had a huge farming operation going on over there, so it was interesting. But the most interesting thing was I could come out of the house up there and look down the road, and I noticed a bunch of old cars parked down here. That was a good sign, because that probably meant there was some music going on down in this area. And could I borrow your pamphlet there for a minute? I appreciate this. I had one of these and was going to bring it out. A little closer? Okay, I was going to bring this out and forgot it. But the reason I did, I was going to tell you a little bit about my granddaddy's activities in the 40s and the 50s. He was not performing much then. They talked later about in the 60s how he came out of retirement, and he didn't actually retire. He just didn't have any work. The old-time music that he played in the 20s and 30s really had gone out of fashion, even here in Johnson County. The musicians in Johnson County at that time, there were a lot of them, especially in this Forge Creek area, and they played a little more modern music than he played in the 20s and the 30s. But when he couldn't get work, he took other jobs. He worked in several different capacities. Sawmilling was one of his specialties. He was good as a sawmill worker. And but he never gave up on music. And what he liked to do was to work with other musicians. And in this pamphlet, I think Minnie told you about it, and I'm not selling it, but she sent me a copy, and I think it's great. I recommend you consider getting one of these. And there's an article in here from a man named John Taylor, who, as I recall, lived up in the Forge Creek area. And John talks about how he got a little, as he pronounces it, help from Tom Ashley. And this little story that John, it's a short article, but it's great. And I thought, what he says is better than what I had. And he starts out, he says, I met Tom Ashley in 1951. Now, in 1951, I was 9 years old. And I'll save you the math. 74. I was 9 in 1951. But I remember this group. And here's what John said about my granddaddy. He says, Tom was standing in front Well, first he says him and his partner Roscoe Gamble were playing up at the Bean Festival, and or at the Bean Market, and we had, green beans was big. Johnson County was green bean capital back then, and they were playing music at the Bean Market. Tom was standing in front, listening and watching. When we finished playing, he came up and said, "You boys got some talent, but you need a band and some help." That's the way John pronounced help. And he says, "I can help you put a band together and show you how to act in front of people." Now that is a perfect example of the kind of music activity my granddaddy did in 40s and 50s. Is what he went around, and I'll use my pronunciation, he went around to help people, whatever they needed. If they needed an announcer, a MC, he could do that. He could do some comedy. He could coach them and help them with their harmonies and show them how to act in front of people, take up tickets, anything you needed. He loved show business. He wanted to keep involved in show business. This band consisted, John says, consisted of Fred Price, Earl Payne, I think he played the banjo, and Hardin Allen, and of course Roscoe Gamble. As I recall, Roscoe had a mustache back then, because even though I was 9, and they must have been together 2 or 3 years, I remember this group very well, and they were great. And he says also, Tom was instrumental in booking the band with the Arthur Smith TV show in Charlotte, North Carolina, and live radio shows on WATA in Boone, North Carolina. So he could get you a job, is what it was. So he stuck with that through the 40s and the 50s until we got into the rediscovery phase. And